As opposition, we don't regret the fact that merging in tech industry exists because we think this merging is actually beneficial for several reasons. Number one, when both can have consent, we think they know that when they work together, they can create mutual benefits. But number two, we think that merging can actually save these companies that are on the brink of collapse, which at the end of the day harms the labor force even more, simply because the labor is going to be unemployed at the end. Several rebuttals first, right? Firstly, talking about terms and conditions. We don't think that a longer terms and conditions is actually any real harm since customers, when they use the app, they need to agree on terms and conditions in the first place. They are required to read these things. But however, when the text is too long, we don't think that this is actually regretful, but we think that this is actually a benefit and incentive for companies to actually shorten and simplify their terms for people to be able to understand it better. If this still fails, we think that other things like call centers, help centers, etc., also still exist under our site. Number two, talking about privacy, right? In terms of privacy, we don't think that this is an absolute, since at the end, customers also use the company's products in exchange for their privacy. Data gathering isn't always bad because most times these companies are needed to know your preferences at the end, and the algorithm also censors inadequate things. For example, terrorist videos on YouTube that was also blocked by the algorithm and saving a lot of people from having to see those grotesque things. At the end, things like Google preferences and Google and the YouTube algorithm are actually a benefit for customers at the end. Moreover, we think that tech companies are not in complete control of this because tech companies sometimes are required to make and scan the data in order to send it to the government. And this is a direct order, which means that the companies cannot do anything, right? For example, scanning your KTP on Gojek and stuff, which actually is a benefit in order to activate features like pay later that actually gives more options to customers. Number three, when government claims that imbalance on big and small parties exists. The response is first is no, because you have to realize that in order for both parties to be consented, they need to both believe in mutual benefits. Also, mergers are not made in one day, ladies and gentlemen. We think that long negotiations have been made and done in order to satisfy both stakeholders. If one stakeholder isn't happy, they can always not sign the merger in the first place or even renegotiate the entire thing. Moreover, abuse simply isn't likely to happen simply because both companies have future projects, and imbalance is only going to create bumps in these projects, which is going to ruin these projects and brand them as a failed merger. Even if, for example, abuse still happens, it is still justified in the scenario that smaller companies are failing and about to collapse at the end. It is way better for your company to be taken advantage of at the expense of your company being able to be salvaged and your workforce also not being laid off at the end. Final rebuttal, talking about how we're going to harm customers because now they have no options, at least that's what they say, under government's of the house. The response is firstly is no, because you have to realize that these customers still have a lot of choices because of the tendency of the tech industry that still have different varieties at the end, where new options are always springing up left and right. Even if there is less options, for example, we think that it is still fine because at the end, customers don't care about choices, but what they care is better service at the end. When companies merge, they're able to streamline their services in order for it to be more efficient at the end. And number five, talking about innovation, we know that innovation and incentives exist because the technological industry is dynamic at the end. Mergers are also able to innovate using more available services when they merge. For example, maybe now Tokopedia and Tokped, for example, can you make people go shop for groceries and have one day shipping and so on. Both sides need each other. Hence, we see this as an improvement. Moving to my arguments, right? I have several layers. First layer, talking about why merging is not regrettable. You have to realize that companies merge with good intentions. A, they make mutual innovations and profits, and B, they can always save a failing company. You have to realize that merged companies realize that innovation cannot be done by killing other companies in fierce competition, but actually work together to create a stronger force. Companies can improve without much cost. For example, Tokped completes Gojek services and Gojek completes Tokped services and so on with their one-day delivery and so on. For customers, we think that they are also being benefited and they also have better journeys and satisfactions with these kinds of merging companies. This is very likely because now these technological services are more complete and they give customers a better satisfaction. For example, Google and YouTube, when now you can one-time log into Google and you can still access all of your YouTube accounts even though you've already logged into Google and such. Number three, talking about profit, right? The profit under merging is going to be better simply because there's also going to be better labor, better resources, and so on. And we think that the labor force also benefits from this profit, right? Because now they get more investments and they also get the assurance of their company actually being able to survive and all of that. Compare what happens under government side of the house. Under government side of the house, in which they focus more on competition and trying to kill each other in a fierce battle of industries. We think that in these kinds of toxic competitions, most likely what will happen is that things like competitive pricing and lowering your prices as strategically as possible is at the end going to harm yourself and most likely going to harm the laborers working for you because now these laborers are at the brunt of your competitive pricing and they suffer from lower wages, they suffer from late paychecks, and all of that, which makes not only your workers less effective, but they also make you less efficient, and also these workers are less happy, less content with their jobs, and so on. Moving on to my second layer, why fairness under merging companies still exists, right? I have two reasons for this. Number one is process, and number two is government protection, right? Let's talk about the process. You have to realize that for companies to merge, they need whether it's full merge or part merge, they have to have lots of negotiations, which means that they have a thoroughly understanding conversation about, for example, splitting the profits more fairly, taking responsibility for what sectors, and so on. We think that in a lot of these processes, in where these companies are able to negotiate most of their deals, we think that these companies are also going to create fairness on what gets what and how they are going to benefit from each other. But number two, talking about government protection at the end of the day. In extreme cases, when abuse does actually happen, there's always things like the antitrust law and also the Commerce Bureau that helps abuse companies break free from abusive companies at the end. We think that at the end of the day, fairness still exists. Moving on to my second argument, right? What are the benefits of companies being merged? We think that at the moment that companies are better at being merged, we think that there's going to be better innovation because now, since they both own each other, both companies have more resources and both companies have more services ready, which means that when they want to make innovations, for example, they can do it at a better and faster rate with lesser costs, right? Compare under government side of the house, in which there's only going to be toxic competition, in which what they do is not trying to work together to make better services, but figure out how to kill other companies at the end. Moreover, we think that merging can actually increase the quality of quantity of products. If you're talking about quantity, there's going to be a wider scope and market for both of these merging companies. And B, if you talk about quality, there's going to be better quality since now you have two CEOs, for example, or two stricter standards that are being applied to your company. We think that these are all benefits of merging companies, and hence we don't regret it at all. We are very proud to oppose.